Hi guys, it's Ali, welcome back to my channel. In today's video I'm sharing some tips and tricks on using layered stencils and how you can use them different ways to get different effects. This layered stencil set is from AliExpress and the link to it, as well as all the other products featured in this video, will be in the description box. If you enjoy this tutorial, please give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more videos just like this. I hope this video teaches you something new. Let's get into the tutorial. So I'm starting off here with a piece of watercolour paper. This is just cheap watercolour paper from a pad from Tiger, and I am using the first layer of the stencil. I'm sticking that down with a little bit of washi tape, and the first colour we're going to use is Distress Oxide in Rustic Wilderness. This is a brand new colour for me, so I was quite excited to use this for the first time. This brush is from AliExpress. I got it in one of my recent hauls, which you might have seen. If you haven't watched my AliExpress hauls and you want to watch them, then I'll put the link to the playlist up here in the cards. I am just using circular motions with this little brush to apply a layer of the Distress Oxide ink, and I'm not going all the way to the edge of the stencil because I want a kind of faded out look. You'll see that when I peel off the stencil. What a lovely reveal that is. The second layer, I'm going to use another Distress Oxide. I'm actually going to use peeled paint this time, which is a slightly lighter colour. Because it's a Distress Oxide ink, you can actually use a lighter colour on top of a darker colour and you won't really have any problems. Now, the way you line this stencil up, there are 3 squares cut out of the stencil at the top and the bottom of each layer. So you can basically line these up together and see exactly where the stencil goes. Now with this stencil, it's a little bit easy to see the second layer because it just goes on top of the leaves, but the third layer is a little bit tougher. I actually found these stencils really easy to line up when I was using them throughout this video, so I can really recommend them. The third colour I'm going to use on this one is Distress Oxide in Candied Apple, which is like a really nice bright red. Something about Distress Oxides and inks is the colours are just so nice. It doesn't matter which combination of colours you use, they all go so perfectly together. I think that might be why, like, once you get a couple of Distress Oxides, you just can't help but want to complete your collection. Even though they're a little bit expensive, just you don't have to think about which colour goes with which colour, which is amazing. I don't want to have to think too much when I'm creating. So this is my first background that I've made, just using 3 different colours of Distress Oxide ink. The second background I'm going to use Distress Ink this time, which will give me a slightly more organic look because the oxides blend to like a really smooth finish and the inks have more kind of like a rough and ready look. I personally like both looks a lot. It just depends really what you want to go for. This one is Distress Ink in Crushed Olive that I'm using for the first layer, and then for the second layer I will use Distress Ink in Mowed Lawn, and again I'm just using that second layer of the stencil. The brushes I'm using here are actually off Amazon. They're like a set of makeup brushes. I think they cost about £10. I'll put the link to them in the description box. I can really recommend them. They're really affordable and they work really well. I don't really get on that well with the flat traditional blending tools. I'm not really a fan of those, so I got these and I just wash them every now and then. So for the third layer on this one, I'm using Tonic Studios Glacier Paste in this really nice pink shade. I can't remember the exact name of the pink shade, but I'll put it in the description box so you can go check it out if you want to get it for your own collection. This is I really like Glacier Pastes. They're a little bit different from the Glimmer Paste, which I'm going to use in a bit so you can see the differences. They just make an almost like foiled effect on your project. And they're really easy to clean up as well. Something I did find with these stencils is that they were super easy to clean. I just rinsed them under the tap and they were done. We're now on to the third background, and this time I'm using Distress Ink in Pine Needles. So this is a slightly more blue toned green, and I think this one I'm going to go all the way to the edge of the stencil, and then when I trim the panel down later I'm just going to cut off the edges. The second layer on this one, I'm only going to do 2 layers on this background. I'm just going to use the Nuvo Glimmer Paste in, I think it's called Moonstone. It's just like the clear iridescent one. Now, something to bear in mind when you're using Glimmer Paste is it will pick up the colour of any ink that is underneath. So you don't want to get loads of it out, put it on your project, then scrape it off and put it back in the jar, because it's going to change colour. And you will see that this clear iridescent glitter paste actually becomes more green by the time I'm finished. So you can see there on the spatula that it's turned into this sort of light green. There you go. So that's just something to be aware of. It's not really a problem, because I think it's just a different effect, isn't it? So if you want it to stay the original colour, I would recommend the glacier paste instead, because they don't tend to pick up the colour. And if they do, it's only a tiny little bit. I didn't really have a problem with that. So now we're on to the fourth and final panel that I'm going to do today, and I'm once again going to use the Distress Oxide in Rustic Wilderness. I really, really like this green. It's so nice. I don't know what it is about it, but I actually received this one as a Christmas present. I was really chuffed to get that, because I really wanted to try it. So just another layer of that Distress Oxide Rustic Wilderness, and then the last panel I'm using glacier paste again, but I'm just using the white one. So this is going to give us sort of a white foiled effect just on leaves. So something that is quite cool about layered stencil sets is usually you can just use 2 layers instead of all 3. So on both of these panels I've just used the first 2 layers for the leaves, but you could just use the first layer of the leaves and then the berries as well instead for a different look, which is quite cool. So that's all of my panels done now. So that's all 4 that I've got there, all using the same set but all giving a different look. And now we're going to make those into some cards. So I've got my absolute favourite mini trimmer here, which is the Tonic and Tim Holtz mini one. This is going to be a really silly thing to say, but one thing I do wish it was slightly bigger. I wish that the measurements went slightly bigger than 6 inches, because quite often I have some problems with measuring my panels when they are larger than 6 inches. There wasn't a problem here because these are all smaller than 6 inches, so it's fine. I've actually got a big 12 by 12 guillotine now, which is great, so I can measure things bigger than 6 inches. But I do really love this trimmer, and I pull it out a lot and use it for when 6 inches is a fine measurement for me to use. So I'm just trimming down all my panels here because I'm going to mount them onto 6 by 6 cards, so I need them to be slightly smaller than a 6 by 6 card. And then this one, I'm going to show you a little trick. I've got some ink that went through the little squares that you use to line up your stencils, and I really didn't want to just trim that bit off because I like the fading effect on the edge. So I've just used my mono sand eraser to rub the ink away, and what this does is it takes the very top layer of your paper off, and then you can't see the ink anymore. So if you don't have one of those, I really recommend it because I use mine all the time. Now we're on to making our cards, and I'm going to be using the Hobbycraft Brights Vellum paper pad. This is new in my collection. It was in a recent haul. I just thought it'd be really nice as a layering piece underneath the panels. So we've gone for the red. That's going to be for the card with the red berries on. And then I've also got a sheet of the pink, which is going to be for the card with the pink berries on, in case you hadn't guessed. I'm just trimming those down so they are slightly larger than my panels, so they're going to just peek out on the edge. And something I actually did with these, although I haven't showed it in the video, because if I showed everything we would be here for many hours, and I'm sure you don't have many hours, is that I used a die to cut a square out of the middle of these panels, because you're not going to be able to see that once I've mounted it on the card. So you can save a little bit of vellum for another project. So that's something that I really recommend to do, is to, you know, you can either use a die, or if you don't have a die, you can also just use a craft knife and a ruler. Or, I mean, you don't even need to use a ruler if you don't want to, just to cut the middle bit out, and then it saves you from wasting so much cardstock. So for the other 2 panels, I've used a white glitter cardstock, and then also this really pale light green cardstock, which is pistachio. It's available on Craft Stash, and I'll put the link to it in the description box. I've got quite a few of these different colours of this card from this brand, and I do recommend it. Now we're going to start assembling the cards. So for the one with a glitter panel, I've used some red line tape just to give it a little bit of extra adhesive, because it can be quite difficult to stick things on top of glitter. Then I'm going to mount that on the card. I've used a craft 6x6 card blank here, so that's that done. There's the card ready, so it's just ready to add a sentiment, which we'll do in a little bit. And then here's the other one. Again, I've mounted this one on the pistachio, and then this is again going to go on a craft 6x6 card blank, and that's ready to go for a sentiment. Now we're going to go back to the other 2. This pink one is going onto the pink vellum, and then that's going to get mounted onto a white card base, just because then you can see the vellum a little bit better. And then the last one is the red one, and that is going to get mounted on the red vellum and mounted onto a white card base again. So there we go, that's that one. I think my favourite one is the one with the red berries. I really like the way I've faded the ink around the edge. I think it's a really, really nice effect. I didn't really do it on purpose, but once I'd realised I had done it, I thought I may as well showcase it. So now all the cards are ready to have their sentiments made. So that's all my backgrounds done and mounted onto my card bases with my mat. The mats really do make a difference when you mount them on cards. I think it just makes it look a little bit more professional and a bit more finished. So for this pink one, I'm going to use this Thanks die, which has both a shadow and the normal word. So the shadow I'm going to cut out of the pink vellum, which is the piece that was left over from when I die cut the middle of the panel out. And then I'm going to use the white glitter card for the actual word. So I'm just putting them through my Big Shot machine. I think this die set is probably off AliExpress. I'll see if I can find the link to it and put it in the description box if you want to go and check it out. Although I have had it a while, so I don't know if I'll be able to find it. Now I'm going to glue these together. This is my least favourite bit because gluing fiddly things is not really up my alley at all. So I've used the Quickie glue pen and just dotted that on the back of the glitter card, and then I had a lot of trouble actually trying to stick it to the vellum. But I did get there in the end, and then I whacked an acrylic block on top just to hold it still, just while it dries down a little bit. Despite all the trouble that I had sticking this down, it actually does look nice in the end. So, you know, after it had been stuck to my fingers about 6 times, but we won't get into that. We're going to move on to the red card now, and again I'm going to use this red vellum that was left over, and this time instead of going for the glue, I have put some of this double-sided adhesive sheet on the back of the white cardstock that I'm using for the top layer of the sentiment, so hopefully it should be a little bit easier to stick down, but I don't think it does end up being that easy, so trying to make it easier for myself. But yeah, fiddly word dies are like the bane of my life because they look really nice on cards, but to actually get to the stage where they're stuck on your card is it's so frustrating sometimes trying to get it to look how you want it. And the problem with these adhesive sheets, I don't know if because these are cheaper ones, is the backing paper tends to get stuck in the die, so then you have to kind of work quite quickly because the sticky stuff is exposed. So I had a bit of a mare sticking that down, but I've cut that out for you so you've not sat there watching it for ages. And eventually I did get them all stuck down in the right place, and it looked nice. So there we go. Got there in the end. So before I stuck these down, I felt like they needed a little bit of dimension, so I've gone a bit rogue and used some foam tape behind my vellum words. Now usually if you put foam tape or any kind of tape behind vellum, you might see it, but because these only have a very thin line of vellum all the way around the edge, you can't see it when it's on the final card. Nobody looks close enough, you can see, you can't really see it, so I got away with that. It did need the extra dimension to kind of lift it up off the card, just because the pink and the red that I'd used kind of got lost in amongst the design because the design's quite busy. But the dimension really made the difference, and sometimes that's all you need to do on a card, is to just raise your element up a little bit. So we're on to the third card now, and we're going to do something a little bit different for these 2 cards, just so, you know, we don't get bored. I'm going to use these thank you dies, which cut really long, skinny words, and I'm going to cut those out twice from this pistachio green cardstock. And then what I'm going to do is stick them together so they're a little bit more sturdy and a bit thicker, just because that's going to make them easier to stick down. It's going to give them a bit more dimension. It's going to make them a little bit more sturdy, and they're just going to be a lot easier to work with. Once I've got them stuck together, they will be easier to work with. So I'm just going to use a little bit of liquid glue just to stick these together, and to actually stick these together is not as difficult as the sentiment I did before, because you can just squeeze them from the side and kind of nudge them until they get stuck together, and then it does make a big difference to the sturdiness of the sentiment. So this was actually a lot less frustrating than the previous 2 sentiments I did, even though it seems a little bit more fiddly. I just did the same for the U word, and then while they're drying I do like to put an acrylic block on top just to hold them down. And then I'm going to stick these onto this white glitter frame, which is left over from one of the other cards. This is from when I cut the middle panel out of the white glitter card, just to save a little bit of card that was left over. So I thought, oh, this would work perfectly on this card, just to make the sentiments stand out a little bit from the busy background. I've stuck those thank you words on the back of the frame, and I'm just going to leave that there to dry because it was still wet, so it needed some time to like solidify itself together. And then for the very last sentiment for this card, I'm going to die cut a circle of vellum, and then I'm going to stamp it with this thanks so much sentiment. And now we're going to stamp the thanks so much on top with VersaFine. If I did this again, I would probably just go and heat emboss it instead, because the ink did bleed a little bit onto my vellum. You could also try using Stays On ink, which is made for non-porous surfaces, which I do have, but I just wanted to use the VersaFine. I got to the point where I didn't want to do heat embossing, and it was just easier to get the VersaFine out. So I did have a little bit of trouble stamping this stamp because my magnet was too close to the stamp, and it was just making it difficult to get a good impression. So usually what I do is just keep moving the magnet away, and putting a little bit of extra pressure on that area, and in the end I'd pretty much almost got a perfect impression. The other thing you could do is use some removable adhesive on the back of your die cut and just stick it in your stamp positioning tool, which would remove the need to actually use the magnets. I don't really know why I didn't do that, but I do like to do the die cutting first and the stamping afterwards, because I just find that a lot easier than trying to line up a stamp in a die and cut it out that way. So the last couple of things I'm doing is just trimming off these end pieces from this frame so I can then stick it down on top of the card. I also heat set that sentiment as well, because the VersaFine is a pigment ink, so it does need to be heat set or left a long time to dry, and I didn't want to leave it a long time to dry, so I heat set it. So I'm just sticking that thank you sentiment there onto that card, and then using the acrylic block just to make sure the whole thing was stuck down. Because I've used liquid glue here, I can give it a little wiggle because it wasn't quite straight. There we go. And then I'm just going to stick this very last piece of vellum. I've used a little bit of liquid adhesive on the back, which sometimes you might be able to see. I've just tried to put it behind the words, and in the end you can't really tell it's there. It's not really a problem. And then to make sure that it sticks down properly, I've just used a adhesive block so I don't smear the glue behind it. So there we go. One final thing before we go, I just want to stamp the inside of my cards. So I'm going to use a couple of different thank you sentiments here. I'm just going to use Memento Tuxedo Black ink, which is one of my favorites because it dries really, really fast, and I'm really, really impatient. So I don't want to be sat waiting around with my cards open because I've used VersaFine, even though VersaFine, you do get a nicer impression, but Memento gives you a perfectly okay impression on the inside of cards, and I really like it. So that's all I'm going to do now. It's just stamp the inside of the cards with some thanks sentiments. I've just used this thanks so much one twice, and then on the other cards I didn't want to use that one because I didn't want to use the same sentiment that was on the outside of the card on the inside, so I've used this long skinny thank you stamp instead, which goes all the way across the middle of the card. Just stamp that on both, and there we go. Those cards are complete. Apart from one little ink smear that I got rid of with my mono sand eraser again. That's all I have for you today. I do hope you enjoyed this video and that it taught you something new. If you did enjoy it, please give it a big thumbs up and leave me a comment down below to let me know. That really helps my channel to grow. Thank you to all my new subscribers who have joined the channel recently. I really appreciate you hitting that subscribe button. I hope to see you back here on my channel again soon. Until then, have a great day, and I'll see you later. Bye!